So as we do every week, Dean, we look at the indexes for the currencies, and this is the index for which is a basket of that specific currency against everything else. And we also look at some of the commodities, if you will, because there are commodity currencies, and we see if there is a strength of that economy in that commodity that would eventually lead into a strength in that the commodity currency. Okay, so we look, these are the indexes here, which this is just a basket of that currency against all the other currency. So for example, it has nothing to do with the dollar yen, it is the pound against the basket of all the other currencies, and it gives us a clear picture of how strong that currency is and how weak that currency is. So the first one we look at, as always, is the dollar, and that is the dollar index. And again, for the newcomers, we color code our charts, Dean, and the lines that you see over here on the left hand side, which are light blue, dashed light blue, like what you see over here, these are what we identify as significant points or structural points. The significant points are very strong buying points if it's a buy, or it's a strong selling point. The structural point is a trend changing point. That's the basic differentiation between them, but we color code them as with light blue with small dashed line. That indicates that they are price points of high importance. So if I'm going to look at the weekly chart for the dollar, you can see that for we have a structural point, not just a significant point or a major trend changing point at the 8082 based on the index. And we did this week, we had a reversal week, which is a positive. Again, we already are in a short-term upward move. It has not yet given us a trend change, but we have now this continuation or that reversal week on during the last week. So that's a strong buy signal from last week. Plus, as you can see, that we closed the week at 80.75, and our structural point is 80.82, and you're looking at 4 or 5 pips, which is basically nothing in the course of in the span of foreign exchange or currency. This is a $3 trillion market, and when you have a close right at 1 or 2 ticks below the point, it is as good as it's being there. Plus, as you can see, we did go trade above the 80.82 during the week. The high of the week was 81, which is not bad at all. And then we closed the week at 80.75, which makes it extremely strong. And based on the pattern that you see here, this is a very strong buy signal. And our buying point, again, for the dollar is 5 pips away if we're going to buy it above 82, above 80.82. So basically your risk on that trade, you buy it above 80.82 and you're going to place your stop right below that, below this point. So this is a pretty strong buy signal for the dollar, and the dollar here thus looks extremely strong. We're going to go to the daily chart, and this is the view that we have on the daily chart. Again, for the last 4 days of last week, we only had one negative day, which was Monday of last week, and thus far we're pushing daily, every day, pushing higher and higher and higher. All what we need now is to trigger a close above the 82, and that will be the beginning of what I would believe would be an uptrend, a new uptrend in the dollar. So that is a very positive close for the US dollar. The second currency we're going to look at is in the looking from last week, it was the Australian dollar, which we last week was very strong. We looked at was one of the currency that we bought initially last week. And as you see, the index, the currency itself, not the dollar, the Aussie dollar, but just the basket for the Australian dollar, this is, we're sitting at all-time highs. I mean, this is the strongest where the Aussie has been. We're nowhere near a sell signal. So I do not like this close for the week. It is a slightly weak close, but definitely this is the strongest trend, upward trend that we have so far in any currencies. So the Aussie is quite strong, but we might have a short-term sell signal. But these sell signals are going to be short-lived. They are not a trend changing. They might be for a scalping to the downside. So the dollar is strong and the Aussie is strong because this is a buy. But the signal that we have in the US dollar is stronger than the signal that we have in the Australian dollar. We're going to look at the next one at the Swiss franc because it was also one of the currencies that moved last week. And this is what we were discussing last week in the session. This is just to remind you guys, this is what the pairs that we identified last week as the strong, and these are the ones that we identified last week as the weak. So the Australian dollar was the strongest, and that was our first buy, and then it was followed by the US dollar, and you can see that the close that they had moved up. And we also identified that the Swiss was a strong currencies, and these were the three that we started to buy in the beginning of the week. And the weakest, the ones that we had on the weak side was the British pound, the euro dollar, and the Japanese yen. And of course, as you have seen, we had a fantastic trading week in the euro and in the British pound. So the Swiss franc is still quite strong. Excuse me. And this is, even though we had a little bit of a pullback in the Swiss index, it's still a buy signal and it is still strong. We don't have any intermediate or any sell signal on the Swissy so far. And that, so based on what you look at the chart here, Dean, this is, if you see that pullback coming in from the highs, that is a gauge of, I mean, yes, it is strong, but you see this pullback, that's a sign of a selling off or weakness at the end of the week. Versus when you look at the dollar, you can see here that this came down from the lows to close near the highs. So now if I'm comparing apples to apples, one came from the high to the low, that's a sign of weakness, and this is coming from the low to the high, that's a sign of strength. And this is where both of them are strong, both of them are going up. But if I take one versus the other, I will be taking the dollar as my number one versus the Swiss, because what I have just explained to you. All right. Now we're going to look at the British pound. This has been just very, very poor currency. It is extremely weak, and it's just not having any strength whatsoever. It is rolling over, and it has closed the week below the 156, and you will see it better when we're looking at the dollar pound, the cable pair. You'd see that we do have a continuation to the downside. So the pound is really weak, and this is on the daily for the pound index. And if we're going to look at the euro, it is pretty much the same as the British pound. And one of the things that we have discussed, if you guys remember when you were here in the grad club and we had the the Christmas party and we were talking about the euro and the pound for the last week, and the identifying the structure points for both of them. The euro and the pound last week have been working extremely well, following the structure points and following the significant points. So right here, this is the upside down, Dean, of the what we had in the dollar. That's the upside down. So if the dollar indicated strength, then this upside down here indicates weakness, and that we should be looking for it to continue to the downside. So between this as a weak, and I'm comparing it to the British pound, you can see that both of them are pretty much one and the same. Both of them are fairly weak. The euro might be slightly weaker than the pound, but both of them are pretty much on the weak side. The last but not least, and this is the most interesting for us to look at, and that's why I left to the end, is the Japanese yen. This is sitting, now we have this structural point, which is the 118. This has been trying to break the 118 now for the last 4 weeks, and every time it bounces above it, it looks like what they call a dead cat bounce. It just bounces up only to turn around and fail and to come back down. And we did test the 118.45. We bounced back above it. It's nothing to write home about. As you can see, this weakness. So it bounced above the 118, it went back again to the 119, and then it failed. So we have a clear, well-defined sell signal in the yen. So the pound is weak. So this is how the hierarchy that we're going to. My first one is going to be, the strongest is the US dollar. The second one is going to be the Australian. The third is still the Swiss franc. Okay. Now on the weak side, this one here having a well-defined sell signal. So the weakest right now is going to be the yen, because the yen is the one that's giving me a clear, new, fresh sell signal. And we also have the euro as weak and the British pound as weak. And so this is going to be our hierarchy, and we're looking to be buying the dollar and probably selling the pound, or going short the pound cable, doing the same thing with the euro dollar, going short the euro dollar. We might go long Aussie euro, and we're going to see what's happening with the yen. Okay, so this is the basic 6 indexes that we cover, and now we're going to go and take each one of those pairs together. So we're going to match the strongest with the strong and the weakest with the weak. So while I'm saving the recording,